So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for the panel discussion on Back to the Energy Future. My name is Colin Corey. I'm with GNS Science, and we have a great panel tonight talking about our energy transition and what the future will look like. So just to get us started, a big welcome to everybody, and thank you to our partners in helping us putting on events this week. That includes Venture Taranaki and the Western Institute of Technology Taranaki, or WIT. I also want to thank our panel members for taking the time to be with us today, and those of us live here and those joining us online as well. So we are live from the Theatre Royal Lounge in New Plymouth, Taranaki. And so this event is a part of many other events going on this week across the country, talking about innovation and technology. And this one is focused on our energy transition. So just to take you through what the hour will look like, we're just going to start off with a brief introduction of our panel members. So I'll just introduce you who they are, and then I'll let them give a brief introduction of themselves and where they fit in the energy space. After that, I will go through a few of our questions that we've prepared beforehand, and I would encourage you as well to ask questions through the chat on the live stream, and we will pick a few of those and pose those questions to the panel throughout the hour as well. And then we'll just bring us back for a final note from each, and that will be us. So so I think I'll just start off by going through the concept of what this panel discussion is and why it's important. So as you know, it's called Back to the Energy Future. At GNS Science, we have research programs around transitioning to a low carbon energy future, whether that's in green hydrogen or geothermal energy or that kind of thing. And so we wanted to, there's a lot of talk about transitioning to a low carbon future and a lot of discussion on that. And we wanted to put ourselves into the future. And so we combined our transition with the concept of the Back to the Future movies. If you haven't seen them, it's about a teenager that gets involved with a scientist who has a Delorean, which is a car from the 1980s that has a time machine in it. And they travel back through time and forward through time. In the second movie, they travel 30 years ahead of what was the present day for them, and they see all these new gadgets and technologies, hoverboards, and this kind of thing, and 3D glasses and VR. And while not all of those technologies came to fruition today, a lot of them have, and it really shows that going to the future and seeing what can be possible is really important. So we decided to combine those two concepts and have a good discussion, putting ourselves into the future. So for this particular one, you went on Trademe, you bought a DeLorean, and it has a time machine in it. So we're going to be transported to 2040, and we're going to see, where we ended up in 2040 and what got us there. What technologies have we created in that time, and also cover other aspects as well beyond technology. For example, the social aspects and jobs, and the people that get us there. At the end of the day, it's all about people, and that's a really important thing to talk about beyond technology, and that's what encompasses innovation. So just getting onto our panel members, we have CJ Lepper from Hiringa. They're a company based in New Plymouth, and they're helping to set up hydrogen refueling stations across the country. And it's a great startup that has really attracted a lot of attention, not only in New Zealand, but also internationally. Next, we have Brett Rogers. He's a director at Elemental Group and has a great perspective on the energy ecosystem across New Zealand and globally. On my left, we have Moana Wilson. She is a recipient of GNS's, she's this year's GNS Master's Student Scholarship recipient, and she'll bring a great social lens and as well as Māori and iwi perspective to our discussion. Next to her, we have Ingrid de Bod from Port Taranaki, and she's going to help bring us perspective on engineering and also the ports and the import and exporting of goods into New Zealand, which is a really important aspect of our country. Lastly, on my far left is Kyle Hall, and he works with WIT and is a director there, and and is helping to help train the people of the future. So what I'll do is, so we've just got into our Delorean. We're now 2040. I'll get each panel member just a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, their perspective, and just a general thought of where we are in 2040. So I'll let you take it away, CJ.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, so CJ Lepper, grew up locally here in New Plymouth, went, traveled abroad, did a little bit of study, returned back to New Plymouth, looking to work in the oil and gas industry originally, which is, a very exciting opportunity for me coming out of university. I've always had a bit of a passion for energy and renewables in a way as well. I was actually fortunate enough while I was going through uni to help my father on a biogas opportunity biogas project rather, where we were actually capturing pig manure and turning it into electricity to offset the electricity that we required from the grid, also using some of the waste heat to heat the piggery as well. So from a young age, I've kind of tinkered with some new technologies and been really impressed with New Zealand's ability, or New Zealand's renewable energy sources and their ability to put those to good use. And that kind of led me, I think, into quite a fortuitous opportunity to meet with the Hittinger team in the early days and start working for them around 3 years ago, where we're doing very similar things. We're taking New Zealand's kind of abundance of renewable energies and putting them into uses which are quite applicable to what we'll be talking about tonight, I think, especially for decarbonising heavy transport and other opportunities. So I think, the energy ecosystem at the moment, or the environment it's quite exciting in a way. There's a lot of challenges that we're facing, but I think everyone's, we're at a tipping point where everyone's bought into the fact that we do need to change. And I think at 2040, looking backwards, I think this time around 2020 would be quite a pivotal moment where we've changed direction. Everyone's bought in, we've stopped talking about it, and we're actually starting to do things. So I think there's going to be a lot of progress between now and 2040.
Great. Thanks, CJ. Brett?
Did you see my notes, CJ?
I did. Did Kara write them for you?
Must have. Hi, I'm Brett Rogers, Director at Elemental, as Colin explained. And my background, I'm a Tikawiti boy from just up the road, and studied at Auckland University because I quite like maths, and then got into oil and gas because I quite like energy. And with that energy background, I worked for Shell here and overseas, and also with Todd here and overseas. One of the fun things with energy is that projects tend to be quite large, and so if you're doing projects for people, they give you a whole lot of money and you get to spend it, and it's really, really a good experience. So for those of you thinking about getting into engineering and energy, I recommend it. They didn't pay me as much as I spent for them, unfortunately. So that was my fossil fuel days. We set up Elemental looking to do some wonderful things in the New Zealand EEZ, because that is a huge area that New Zealand looks after. But a gas ban in New Zealand has put paid to that. And interestingly enough, the thing that we discovered is that there's actually a better energy resource, and that's called the wind. And if any of you have the pleasure of living in places like Wellington or New Plymouth, you know that it's also quite strong, which is a great recommendation for doing it. So now Elemental is pushing ahead with a lot of renewables. We've done a huge amount of work in the Pacific and in the Caribbean, converting diesel power sets to solar wind farms with batteries. And that's been really exciting work, really really good stuff to have been doing. And now we're looking to bring a lot of that skill set back into New Zealand to be doing the renewables that we need. So yeah, and in 2040, I think that's the first question I get later, so I'm not going to tell you the answer now. Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, Brett. Moana.
Kia ora tātou. I am Moana, and the Moana is me. And I sit on this panel today, and I originate from Putaua ki te maunga, ko Ohine Matero te awa, ko Ngāti awa, te iwi, ko mātātu te waka, and kei konei ahau. Ka noho ahau ki Whakatane. So I live and I come from Whakatane, and we have a volcano, and she is temperamental, as we all know. And it's good to be at this particular table right now to be able to discuss and think about our papa tuanuku. And like I said, I am Moana, and Moana is me, and come from the Indigenous perspective. So that's my one side. My other side is I'm a Wilson, and actually I'm from Scotland, and my dad is very Scottish, and I was actually brought up in Invercargill. And part of that upbringing is I had a really awesome father who was very inquisitive. And so back in the time, he was, I think he worked for the post office, and he was an engineer radio tech back in 1960s, 70s. So he kind of was doing the tech at that particular time. And of course, in my garage, my father had solar power panels. He had sonic birds that would sing to make the plants grow. And that was just in his weekend. So that's my other side that I come in, my science. I've got a Bachelor of Māori. I've been teaching 30 years for it, all of New Zealand high school, you name it, bilingual, trilingual, and mainstreams throughout, right from Invercargill right through to Auckland, and also teacher of science, teacher of linguistics at the moment, and understanding how it's in the bodies, what bodies of knowledge that we have had from the past to take us into the future. And it's actually in our waiata, it's actually in our language, and it's all in those stories and in our arts that we can actually use and help with our future. Kia ora.
Thanks, Moana. That was great. Ingrid.
Hi, I'm Ingrid Dibod from South Africa originally, and I'm currently working at Port Taranaki. So 6 years ago, I started working for Worley Parsons in South Africa, and then I moved over to New Zealand and joined Worley Parsons there, where I worked in the oil and gas industry. And then I went off and had a baby. And after that, I joined Port Taranaki, which has been a wonderful change and a very interesting move in my career. My husband and I bought a little farm just outside of New Plymouth 4 years ago, and we're converting it to a little sustainable living block. And we've got a fruit orchard and a veggie garden, and we grow our own food. We've got cattle and chicken and goats, and we eat our own meat and eggs. And we live completely off grid with solar panels and drinking rainwater. And yeah, we buy from the farmers market. So we try to have a small impact and try to be sustainable. And I think it's the future, and everything that we can all do a little bit and hopefully make an impact. If we all do a bit, it can make a change. So it's exciting. It's an exciting future. I think I'm very excited to see what the future would look like. I've got 2 young babies, and in 2040, they're going to be 20-year-olds studying something. And what's their life going to be like in 20 years, and in what kind of world are they going to live? So yeah, I'm invested in it to make it a good, beautiful, healthy place for them. So.
Great intro. Carl.
Kia ora koutou, ko Taranaki te moanga, ko Waiwaka Io te awa, ko Wolferdine te waka, ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, ko Sedels te hapu, ko Te Piri o Langi te marae, ko Kyle Hall taku ingoa, nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm the Director of Engineering, Energy and Infrastructure at Te Kura Matatini o Taranaki, Western Institute of Technology at Taranaki. And our role is to inform and educate the future of our workforce. It's to transition the current workforce and work with industry about how we might do that and where the opportunities lie. Colin, you asked where, what will 2040 look like? I guess I'm a bit scared. It's only 17 years away, so it's not that far away. And if we think about what we were doing 17 years ago, I guess, we were becoming a bit more familiar with smartphones and computer technology and bits and pieces. So it's not far away. So I guess, the advancements of technology is going to lead us in that direction. We're going to be looking at Web3 and metaverse and all these other wonderful things we don't know a lot about at the moment. So, but we also need to be doing that in a sustainable manner so that we can create an environment for our rangatahi and our next generation to come through and enjoy. Kia ora, Colin.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, so you can see that we've got a great panel with a lot of different perspectives and backgrounds. And I think that's really important when you're trying to tackle an issue, is to make sure that you hear the perspectives of different people, and that will help you to achieve the outcome that you're looking for. So thank you guys again for those great intros. Okay, let's jump into a bit of discussion. We've got some questions. So what I will do is I will just go with a few of the questions that we have prepared. Please do ask questions online as well, if you'd like, so we can get to those as well. And so I'll ask the question. I'll start with one of the panel members, and then we'll just get a discussion going based on that. So the first question is, what game-changing technologies or renewables have been developed or deployed? And I'm going to start with Brett to take us off in 2040.
In 2040.
Mhm.
And the answer is all of them. Because basically all of the technologies that are developed have these advantages, and they all come with disadvantages. And so they don't fit the bill. No one fits the bill perfectly. And so what you're going to see, in my opinion, is, and it's happened already, is that the money that used to flow into the system that is our energy system today is suddenly going, actually, we're going to flow over here. Thank you very much. We're going into renewables. And that is just going to change from being, it has been a trickle. It's becoming a stream. It'll become a river, and then it'll become pretty much dominant. And what that does is it just develops capacity, and it's like feeding a part of your body. If you get bigger and bigger veins, it can just grow. And so we're going to end up using all of the technologies that we can, and some will be predominant. But I think that I once went to a futurist talk, and they said the thing about thinking futurism is that you can think 20 years ahead or 40 years ahead. You know what life will be like? Same as today, because you're still going to have mates, you're still going to be talking to people, you'll still be eating, you'll still be doing all of the things that you do today. So it's going to be very similar, but some things will change a lot, but they'll be small and they'll make a good difference. But generally, it should, if you look at our history, just be better. And I think the thing that's going to be better is we'll have technologies that don't pollute the environment like we do now with our current systems, and we'll be using all of these technologies together. So that's my view on 2040.
Yeah, that's good. Any comments on what we think might be renewables, game-changing tech, or anything else? I mean, CJ, you've got a perspective, I'm sure, on hydrogen and that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. But I do. Brett just asked me to say no, but I do agree. I do agree with you. I like that kind of analogy to there's no silver bullet, and there's going to be a multitude of technologies that will make a difference and need to make a difference. And I think New Zealand is very lucky. We've got an abundance of renewable sources. We've got amazing wind, like Brett talked to. We've got solar. We've got geothermal. We've got hydro. A lot of countries don't have any of those, or are lucky to have one or two. And I think New Zealand needs to, I think we do realize that, but I also think New Zealand needs to stop limiting ourselves and even stop those discussions around, it's too expensive to get to 100% renewable electricity in our grid. We should only really try to get to 90 or stick to where we are now, which is, 85%. But I'd like to challenge that thinking and suggest, why don't we aim for 150% or 200%? and, start 300%. Can I get a 500? and look to export that energy to countries that don't have what we do. Currently, we're exporting oil and gas, right? So why limit ourselves to not aiming for over 100% renewable electricity for what we need? So I think that's, we've got a huge opportunity. We've got a number of resources. The technology will come, as Brett says, money's poured into it, and the generations come through with all that energy to develop those ideas. So I think let's use all of the ideas, all of the resources, and really make a difference.
Ingrid, well, how do you think, talking about export, I think it's important to, think locally, but sort of act globally. How might the port need to adapt to be able to export maybe new products that come from this transition? How do you see the port fitting into that?
So
mix?
there's a bit of technology being developed in the space of a big ship that's got batteries the size of containers that go and park up next to a wind farm, charge all the containers, and then take them to places that need power. So that would be one way of exporting our wind energy to different countries that might not have that energy, or to bring the power offshore to shore and take it to factories, park the container up, and run a whole factory off of the wind power without having to lay expensive cables from offshore wind farms to the shore and then onto our grid. So there's definitely a big space in the port which would be able to support that.
What do you think, Carla? What kind of jobs do you think, like what training needs to happen to as we build these renewables? What sort of, how do you see that?
Yeah, we did a bit of research in end of 2020, I think it was, and there's a lot of that data scientists coming out, and everyone needs a data wrangler or a data scientist, and so understanding how to operate these technologies and break that data down and utilize that space. It was very much a technology world that we were moving into. You'll still need mechanics, electricians, carpenters. Will still need all those people, but there's an element of technology that we'll need to address, and how do we train that workforce coming into that space? So, yeah, data scientists seem to be the go-to in some sense.
Great.
Kia ora. I'm going to have a bit of kōrero to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in regards to our renewable energies, and we are very fortunate. And I think that's something that we shouldn't take for granted either. And because we have to actually make sure that if we are looking at our waters, our rivers, our oceans, our solar power panels or solar, we need to be actually mindful as how much actually do we make sure our own is looked after. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see that, if we're going to do this and go, before we go global, let's make sure that they are local and our whānau are kaitiaki first, and that we actually benefit from that. Mm-hmm. And then actually, why should we also go over there and give when maybe they've got their own kind of resources themselves, but maybe it's in our example and how we work together, how we complement our thinking, our doing, and work together to actually make a really sustainable country, not just a home or a community, but actually a whole Aotearoa country. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we look at places like the Netherlands and we kind of aspire to be a little bit like them because they've got some really awesome things happening. But actually, we've got some really amazing things in ourselves. So when it comes to the resources like our one, our sand, our whenua, our moana, everything that we do, we also need to make sure it's not always about the commercial part of that. It's actually about the mauri of our whenua. And if we keep the mauri at the center of the energy of actually making sure, because one day there's going to be no more sand. one day there's not going to be all this fresh water in Aotearoa if we don't actually keep thinking about that. So yes, I need to be mindful, or I'm going to put that out there for us to think about those kaitiaki guardianship kind of things over the whenua that we have. And not just here, then there's the moana. What about our Pacifica whānau that's close to us?
Great. Yeah, I think, even though we're talking about in 2040, and as Kyle pointed out, that's only 17 years away, actually our perspective needs to be a lot longer than that, and it's that long-term perspective that's really important. And as well as Brett mentioned, just keeping that there's not, and what CJ was talking about too, is that there's no silver bullet, that it's going to be a combination of technologies, a combination of backgrounds that helps to make that happen. So. Okay, we can move on to the next question. So this goes into resiliency. So the question is, how have these technologies that we've just discussed affected the resilience of Kiwis on a community or national scale? So as we've transitioned to a different type of energy, are we more at risk from anything from earthquakes or running out of fuel or something like that as we've moved away from that so-called steady supply of fossil fuels and that kind of thing? And we can start with Ingrid.
Yeah, so I think once we get New Zealand to an even more sustainable 100 or 200 or 500% renewable power source and energy source in our country, it's just going to make Kiwis' lives so much better. We're going to have a healthier country. We're going to have less emissions. We're going to have healthier homes. We're going to have a more resilient, affordable power supply for everybody. And I think, like, if we can all live with solar panels on our roofs, which is free, I put on my washing machine and it's free, just it's going to improve the lives of so many people. And internationally, I think the reputation that New Zealand would get from that would be amazing as well. We would be a leader in the world look how high we already are and sustainable, and we can just make it so much better because we've got so many resources to look after our country and to do this. So as well as in exports, and I think our product would be so much better because we would have that sustainability, the reliability, and it's going to be affordable to do. So, yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think you raise a very valid point there. I think as we build on our renewables, and I think the costs should come down, which is going to mean it's more affordable. There's more energy affordability for everyone. I also think as we kind of decentralize our energy production and it spreads into the communities, like everyone having solar panels on their roofs, and those that maybe can't afford it, there's an easier pathway for them to share energy. I think even Taranaki is doing a cool trial at the moment with the MTR, where they're trialing ways of breaking down that traditional electricity market barrier of having to be tied to one supplier, or only being able to sell your power back to the power provider that supplies you. I think being able to break some of those traditional barriers so that we are more resilient as a community. People can, we can decentralize that energy production. We can share energy. I think there's amazing technologies out there, and people trying to change the status quo to definitely improve resilience as we go into the future.
And you mentioned barriers there and talking about cost and that kind of thing. Does the panel think there's other barriers that need to be overcome in the transition beyond just cost? What other challenges do we have to overcome?
I think that one of the barriers is us. I think one of the barriers is actually that we can, and we are, and we New Zealand, we can do this, and we can do this now. We don't need to wait 40 years. We actually can just start thinking about doing this now.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset, and that's something that we can change in the now. And that's why I think also being in education, I'm very fortunate to see the young minds. And then I've also, you know, I'm up here in high schools and now up with at university. So things can change now. It just depends on the will and the need. And in New Zealand, I just think that the spaces and places that we have, but it's the people. We have this real attitude like, we can do this. Come on, guys, let's just get it done. And when the America's Cup, oh, that's right, let's go to the top of the world because we can. You know? And so I think we should never lose that kind of mindset. And yeah, so I think that's one we need to change ourselves so we can actually get going. I just can't wait to a time that I don't have to pay a power bill. Let's be honest, and we could all be living here in New Zealand. Imagine that I didn't have to pay a power bill, or maybe the butter wasn't $7, it was only $1, or even 50 cents like it used to be. But imagine that we could actually not, and I wouldn't have to work so hard to put that bread and that butter and that power in my little home with my little whānau. And so what would that do? Oh, if I didn't have to work, then I would have time. I would live and breathe in this Aotearoa and life here. We are fortunate. We're very humble to be there together. So yeah, let's do it.
It's a great perspective. Thank you.
I think, Colin, we, you know, over the last couple of years, we've learned to be pretty resilient. You know, we've been sort of cut off from the rest of the world and haven't been able to travel and all those wonderful things that we do like to do. But, you know, the lights are still on, money was still coming in the door and we still got fed. So it wasn't too bad. And, you know, as we move forward and these technologies come on, and I guess the real opportunities, we'll get back time. You know, we'll get back time with our whānau, with our family. We might not be slaving away in the office till 7, 8 o'clock at night, and we know where we live. So, you know, I think that's that resilience piece. We've actually learned to be resilient already, but it's how can we gain from this technology and give back to ourselves and our whānau and our families.
That's a very valid point that, you know, and from both of you, you know, changing your mindset and the way things have changed a lot in the last couple of years. I don't think anybody would have thought a few years ago that we'd be changing the way that we work and how we interact with people, both within our own organizations and our families and those overseas as well. So those are very good points. Okay. We can move on to the next question, and this is going to be starting with Moana again. And so this one is, so what features of the implementation of new technology has made it equitable for iwi and Māori and really anybody in our society? In other words, you know, how have we ensured that everyone was brought along for the journey? How have we ensured that it's been a just transition now that we've, you know, through that energy transition that we've had?
Well, I suppose just me sitting here on this table right now. I think that's a start, because Māori have not been sitting at the table. And why is that? And we know why. And let's be honest about that. And we are tangata whenua. We're the Indigenous. We've been here way in the past. We're going to be here in the future. And we're going to be fine forever. Because there's something about our Indigenous cultures, not just Māori, but if you look around in the Aboriginal people, if you look around and all around the world, there's something that they do. There's something that happens. They are the people of the lands, and they somehow adapt and sustain themselves. Now, because they sustain themselves for over generations of time, well, we have to look at that. And we have to look at what is it that they do? How do they adapt? How come they know this? Because it's actually, they do know it. And I think we're not in opposition or even in conflict. It's in complementary. It's like a marriage, really. You know, we take our Western epistemology and we bring in Indigenous epistemology too, and then we get together and we just work it out. And we work together. Because at the end of the day, what's in common? This earth is what we have in common, and we don't exist at all. People, humans, not at all. unless this earth is going to nurture and be thriving. And when the earth is thriving, we will thrive as a people, as human society. And I think we need to start thinking about being at the table, or actually opening up our mindsets and not being fixed in one particular box, but actually opening it up and have a good look at some of the things. And I understand some of our science. Sometimes we need to be really objectable, and we need to be particular, because we need to break down those things and not attached emotionally. I understand that part. But then sometimes you actually got to feel it. And you've got to take that perspective along with this perspective to get the whole picture. And so, yeah, it's been fantastic this week working with our fantastic 5 GNS scientists and research team to actually bring about, looking at one thing, but we take this one glass and we have to have 360 degrees of perspective to actually get the whole to make it sustainable. And that's what we can do this. And we are doing this.
Yeah, great point. And yeah, I think I agree. Like it's a difficult discussion to have sometimes, and making sure that everybody's brought along that journey. And I think it's important to have, those different perspectives at the table. And one of the reasons why we try to put a panel together that brings that together and have those discussions. So that's great. Any other comments from the panel on the journey and bringing everybody along?
So I think the journey is not a technology journey and for energy. The journey for energy in New Zealand is a social and cultural one. And it started in 2020 with the realization, or maybe 2022, got the year wrong, with the problem being that Māori are overrepresented in prisons. They have higher morbidity, they have lower mortality, they have worse outcomes than most of New Zealand. And the problem with that is, until you admit that that's the case, you can't start to decide what you're going to do about it. And I think the great thing with this transition is that what it did, so I'll talk in 2040 terms, what it will have done is make us look at that and think, where do we want to be when we're here at 2040? And where we want to be is in a just society where energy is an important part of what we're doing. We're no longer mucking up the environment, and we're no longer having social outcomes that are detrimental to big parts of our society. And the spin-off with renewables is it has, and you were talking about this before, Moana, it's not all about the money. It's definitely not, but one of the things that the money does do is it lets us pay for things. And at the moment, the problem we have in New Zealand is the budgets come out and they're just about nicking off this group to pay this group to do this. What renewables offers New Zealand is an opportunity to actually have a whole lot of more money to come in to pay. Well, yeah, and I do like, we are big fans. We're actually discussing with different iwi groups for some energy projects we want to do. And one of the things that we want to have is that the relevant iwi don't have to pay the wholesale price of power, because it's their land. And so that's something that we're looking at. But coming back to it, so the thing sitting in 2040 is that the transition is not only technology and commercial, it's also social and it's also environmental. And 2040 will be a lot better than 2022. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for your perspectives on that. So we'll jump over to some questions from the audience. So we'll start with the first one. So currently, green technology is very inefficient and expensive. Between now and 2040, we need investment in R&D to allow innovation to significantly improve the efficiencies and costs so the adoption is realized by 2040. Moana's good point on making sure NZ looks after itself first, and building on this by 2040, perhaps see us more as a global trading world in which green energy is traded for goods we don't manufacture locally. Any thoughts on that? I mean, you talked about some of the money flowing and that kind of thing, and R&D investment. Do you see the investment coming from within New Zealand, from overseas? What are the thoughts on investment, and where does that actually come from?
I think just on that question, I think. Can you read that again? Just
sure.
That's a big question.
So yeah, it is.
Oh no, sorry. The point of that was starting from the position that renewables are expensive.
That's right.
And
Inefficient
in
expensive.
2022, it's cheaper to do renewables with wind or solar than it is for gas or for coal or for nuclear. And so what you're seeing in Australia now is that they've had this absolute renewables rush. Sorry, in 2022, they had this renewables rush. I'm still I've got time travel jet lag.
They traveled back in time in the first movie, so it's okay.
So the cost of energy in New Zealand at the moment is $200 a megawatt hour. So just think $200. In Australia, it's 40. And it's 40 because they've just had lots and lots of renewables. So the point is that in 2022, renewables is actually the cheapest form of energy. The thing that doesn't work quite so well is that we don't control the sun, we don't control the clouds, and we don't control the wind. And so the slight catch with it is we still have to sort out storage. So I think storage is an important part of that story, but renewables are really cheap if you want energy. It's yep.
Yeah, and I agree with your point there, Brett. It's going to be an interesting, well, again, I'm in 2020, I'll go forward to 2040. Looking back at 2022, with prices surging to $200 a megawatt hour, and I think they actually hit $500,000 a megawatt hour at a point last year when, Hamilton went into darkness. But it's going to take painful moments like that to bring online additional renewables. And I think New Zealand, as 2040 again, New Zealand will see a surge in renewable energy coming online in the early to mid 2020s, which will bring the cost of power down. And then with that cheaper energy comes more opportunities. When you've got abundant energy and it's not so expensive, it opens the coffers a little bit for people to trial new technologies to do things with electricity and energy that's not so achievable when it's so expensive. So I think that's going to be a really interesting and exciting point in time.
Moan, I know your marae has invested in green technologies. How do you see those costs, and how has that affected the way the marae operates and your community?
So I'm Ngāti Tāwhaki, and Ngāti Tāwhaki is situated in the middle of the Urewera in a little valley called Ratoki. Ratoki is a beautiful whenua. It is the centre of the universe because I'm from there. And so Ngāti Tāwhaki is the first marae in our particular area where we have put this technology, and sitting on the trust. Actually, my sister Miriana also was sitting on the trust, but the idea came from us being a little bit of a tutu, and we wanted to have free power. So we redesigned and we applied for funding and we did some more infrastructure. And we did that. When we did that for our marae, we were thinking 50 years to 100 years time. What is it that we need in this marae? Because we've been here for so many hundreds of years. So how we're going to go into the 50 years, into 100. And so solar power was just, we've got to do it. And we had a mindset of, being open-minded to renewable energies, because we knew if we could do it, then guess what happens? The other 12 marae start saying, nohi, nohi. Oh, how'd you get that? Oh, what are you doing? Oh, that's free. How'd you get hot water? It never runs out. So, and of course, we're the example. And then the other 12 marae will come, and then then there's competition to see. Oh, no, my marae is flatter than your marae. And so what we also did is, because we're in the middle of the beautiful natural Urewera, we also had this massive debate about Wi-Fi. No, we don't want that technology. Oh, yes, we do want to. No, we don't want that technology. But we had to be collective and actually putting this big pole in the middle of our uruwera so we could actually live and sustain ourselves. Because we love our whenua. We come from there. We want to be schooled from there. We want to drink the water from our whenua. And so the solar power panels plus along with the Wi-Fi, well, we know what happens now. Finally, we're doing environmental science with our tamariki out there. Our pool is heated because we've got solar power. You know, so and the opportunities to feed the people. If anything happens, if there's an earthquake, because we're in the Bay of Plenty and things like that, or volcanoes go. If anything like that happens, we know that our marae will be that beacon at that particular time because you know, we've got all the power that we need and to be able to cater for any kind of emergency.
Yep. Thank you. Just sort of continuing on, I guess, finances and talking about money and investment. Colin, maybe you can touch on, again, just jobs and maybe career prospects and building up these renewables, whether it's hydrogen or offshore wind. How do you see the career aspects going? Is it something that people should go into, or how do you see that going into the future, and what kind of careers?
It'd be good to have a crystal ball, wouldn't it? So, and I guess that's the reality of some of these futures is that we can't quite see them yet. If we put ourselves in 2040, I don't think we can quite see them yet either. So, you know, what are these jobs? That's pretty important to identify what they are. So then we can celebrate those jobs and celebrate those careers and industries, and then we can get our, you know, our secondary school students and our primary school students to start thinking about their prospective careers, because you know, they might not want to be an accountant or a lawyer or a mechanic or a carpenter. They might want to do something that's quite state of the art and new. They might want jobs that give back to their community and their society that brings them closer to home. So I think there's opportunities. Identifying what those opportunities is a challenge at the moment because no one can really put their finger on it. And part of that earlier question was around overseas investment, and yeah, I potentially think New Zealand does need big overseas investment, and it might happen. You know, we know we've got people coming already to talk about offshore wind and having those conversations. So it might happen by default. And, you know, I guess if the government, you know, no, it's not a political slant, but if we take too long, someone else will come and do it for us. So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Any other thoughts on jobs and careers?
Yeah, probably adding to that, when you're at school and when you're studying at university, very little of what I studied am I actually using now. But it teaches you a way of thinking and just expanding your mind and your horizons, and it teaches you how to think, how to problem solve, how to analyze. And if we're getting educated and if we're educating our children, then whatever happens, they're going to be resilient and they're going to be able to adapt and they're going to learn as the technology comes and as things are changing. So we might not know exactly what we should be teaching them for the next 20 years or to know what to do in 20 years' time, but we can teach them now to be resilient, to think for themselves, to problem solve, and just to keep those minds going and inquisitive and yeah.
I have to pick up on that one because I've been working in schools for some. I'm a real advocate for inquiry thinking and thinking. So it doesn't matter what subject that you actually take. It's actually can we question? Can we work together? Can we do some cooperative learning? Can we be individual, but can we be collective as well? And how do we actually get on? Can we get on with each other? And to get some real, and also you think about all the kinesthetic tamariki. Actually, we talk about some of our learning styles. And one of mine, and I know I've been teaching for a long time, one of our learning styles is doing kinesthetic learning. So we need to do. We don't need to just sit and look and read sometimes. Sometimes we just need to go and do and have a look at it and then unpack that thinking. So I think that's really important that we even look at some of our education and what we're doing right now. I think that needs to go. I think we need to really look at that. Some of it's irrelevant, some of it's not so relevant. And it's not so much about, reading, writing, maths, because we were kind of forced to do that for a wee while. And you just keep doing that. No. Keep looking at the whole, bring the kaupapa, make it about tangaroa or the moana or renewable energy. Put the question out there and get the buy-in, because the kids will do it. And they need to do it. They really do need to get off some of their devices, because they're brought up with them right from 2 years old or 1 year old, some of them. And we need to actually really get that stuff away and get the thinking going. When it comes to funding, I would have to say the funding, I believe the funding needs to come from the government. Because like you've just said, if we actually invest in renewable energy, well, then that's going to save in other areas that we're actually overspending. And so I think we need to have a look at the government. Yes, there are some overseas, offshore, but I am mindful where we get our money from, because what's the obligation that catches back to the funder? And so therefore the funding should, we do need funding. We're not going to do this at all unless we've got some, but I just think that we can do it.
Yeah, good perspective. Okay, we'll move on to our final question. I'll pose this to CJ. So since we're in 2040 still, Brett is maybe in 2020, but we'll bring him back to 2040 again. There's a lot. It feels like the news cycle is so short these days. There's these major events that seem to happen on a regular basis. So the question is, there some sort of X factor or some sort of trigger point that accelerated the transition? That can really be anything. So any thoughts on that, CJ? Is there a single event that caused us to become a low carbon, zero carbon society by 2040?
I don't know if I could put my finger on one certain event that's deviated it, but I think an X factor would be possibly the people. I think it's I think there's a lot of energy and willingness to make the change that's required. I think sitting at 2020, I think it's around 50% of the population's under the age of 35, and that generation was born into this climate crisis, and I think they are the ones that have the most to lose, but they've also got the most to gain. And I've got a lot of faith in that generation that are willing to make the change that's necessary, and they're driven. I think they've got the tools. We've talked about it a little bit tonight in terms of the education and the jobs and resiliency. And I think it's really critical to give that generation the tools that they require to build that resiliency into them. Looking forward 20 years, it's probably hard to imagine how we're going to overcome some of these challenges, but then you look back 20 years and it's quite easy to see, well, the change doesn't seem so significant. So I think we just need to build that, the toolkit, give them the encouragement, and start doing and trial and play. And we're going to fail, but fail fast and try new things. And we can do so much talking, but you've just got to do the doing as well. So I don't know if I answered your question perfectly, but I think I think we're at that tipping point now, and everyone's bought in and agrees, and we kind of know where we need to go. It's just about starting to get there.
Yep. Anybody else?
I'll just jump on in there. So in 24, I think if you look back to 2025, what changes it for renewables is a recognition that New Zealand's blessed in the world with the resources that it has, but that it has an obligation to share it with the world. And I think the discussions pre-2025 were very much about how do we sort out our stuff, instead of taking the approach of how do we help the rest of the world with their stuff. And until New Zealand made that change, it was actually held back in going forward, because it was too much about our problems and it wasn't enough about helping others. And I think that is where the opportunity is for renewables in New Zealand, or was. Now we've nailed it. And building on CJ's first point of the evening is that I think that this will reach a tipping point where suddenly it reaches a tipping point where suddenly everything starts going much, much faster than planned. So through the early 2020s, you feel like you're behind the ball the whole way, but then through the 2030s, you're just nailing it and you're beating all your outputs because you've got the right drivers. Yep.
Yep. So achieving critical mass sooner is perhaps the key sort of X factor that gets us there.
Well, having the right kaupapa,
Mhm.
that's what's missing at the moment is the kaupapa is all about us. It's not about everyone. And Māori are probably the best place to lead that discussion because that's their philosophy anyway.
And Papatua Nuku is our Earth Mother. All of us. So, and that's where, you know, we start there. We know that in that kaitiaki, those obligations to the whenua that we're standing on. But yeah, so yeah, to help others in the world is to actually make sure that we ourselves are grounded in our own kaitiakitanga here, and then look after those resources to be able to show and share that.
Yeah.
And we can do it. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think it's going to be another 20 years. I think it's in 5. Let's go. Our kids are ready. They're really ready.
Any other final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think the whole world can work together and we can all bring something to the table it's not just localized to New Zealand that the problem is, but this energy crisis and the pollution in the world is global. And we can definitely all work together to solve this and be in a better place and have a better future.
Yeah, I think New Zealand's got the opportunity to lead the way though, right? They're a small country and yeah, we could follow others or we could lead. And I think, you know, when we're talking about that X factor transition, it's taking the people on the journey and all the people and walking alongside with everyone so that we don't make the mistakes that we've made in the past and we might be making, but that we're all in it together. We're all in the waka together and we're all rowing in the same direction. And then we all gain, right? We have a better society from that. So.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So yeah, just sort of summarizing, you know, we've covered a few different topics, whether it's financial or social or some of the technology and that kind of thing. But I think what's sort of come out from this panel discussion is the people, and people are behind all of that. And it's important for everyone to shift their mindset, and that we think that, you know, maybe it's not even 2040 by, you know, before that we can do that transition. And yeah, I think that's really key. Is really about the people. Yeah, so that's I think probably the most important part of that, and it's really up to us as a collective, as a country, to be able to work together and to achieve our transition and our climate goals, and not only for us but for others around the world. So thank you very much, everyone. So I'd just like to wrap up and just say on behalf of GNS, thank you to our partners, Metro Taranaki and WIT, our panel members, those in the audience, and as well to everyone online. Thank you for joining us. And that's us signing off. So have a great night. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you.